Alright, now that we have a basic understanding on what the 𝗪_if function does and how it works, it is time to introduce Excel's database functions. And the database function that we will be working with is the DSUM function, and D is short for database. So to begin, let's duplicate this 𝗪if setup for our DSUM function. I'm going to select these cells, Control-C for copy, come over here and Control-V for paste, and then change this heading to DSUM. Alright, for this example, we are going to try to achieve the same results that we got using the 𝗪if function, but this time we are going to be using the DSUM function. So once again, our goal is to sum the total amount of cells for a specific region. So let's click in cell L3 and start to insert our function. We have to type in the equal sign and then DSUM. I'm going to give this function a double click and then come up next to our formula bar and click the FX button to open up our function arguments window. And Excel states that this function adds the numbers in the field or column of records in a database that match the conditions you specify. So very similar to the 𝗪if function, we are trying to sum a range of cells that match a specific condition. But one of the differences between these functions are the arguments. So the first argument is the database, which is the range of cells that make up a list or database. So for this argument, we need to select our whole database. Now our second argument is the field. And the field is either the label of the column or the number that represents the column's position in the list. So in this case, we are trying to sum the total cells for a specific region. And the column that we are trying to sum is the sales column. So for the field argument, we can either enter a 3 because the sales column is in the third column in our list, 1, 2, 3, or we can just select the column heading, which is sales. And lastly, our third argument is the criteria. And the criteria is the range of cells that contains the conditions you specify. The range includes a column label and one cell below the label for a condition. So what does that last part actually mean? So up here in our 𝗪if and DSUM setups, there are reasons as to why we actually have these column headings in our setups: month, region, and total cells. The first reason is that it's organized and easy to read, and the second reason is that the DSUM function actually has to have these column labels to perform correctly. So for the criteria, we actually have to select our column label and one cell below the label for the condition. Now that we have all of our arguments filled out, we can click OK. And currently, it's giving us a total cell of $73,630. And if we select our sales column and look at our status bar, we can clarify that these totals match. The reason why it's summing the whole sales column is because we haven't specified the region yet. So if we come up to cell K3 and type in the West region, now our total comes out to be $12,513. I'm going to apply the accounting format to this cell to make it a little bit easier to read. Now to double check to make sure that this function is working properly, I'm going to come over to the regions column, select our drop down, and apply the filter to the West region. Then select our cells column, and the status bar shows a sum of 12,513. Then I'm going to go back to the data tab, clear the filters so we can see our formulas again, and we can see that the total cells for the West region was $12,513, which we saw in the status bar. And if we wanted to figure out the total cells for the North region, all we have to do is click inside our criteria and type in North. Now we have the total sales for the North region. So as you can see, we can get the same answers using both of these functions, but they just handled their arguments a little differently. As we just saw with the DSUM function, we had to build this kind of setup to have our column labels to apply the condition for the criteria argument. For the sum_if function, we didn't have to use column labels at all. I just chose to because it's easier to understand what we are trying to sum. Now, one very important thing to keep in mind when creating this column label setup for our DSUM function is that these column labels need to match our database column headers exactly. For example, we use the region for our criteria. So over here in our region column label, if we accidentally misspelled this column label, let's say that we forgot to put the O in region. Now we're getting a value of 0 for our total sales. Now sometimes it might not be that obvious. For example, if we edit this cell back to the correct spelling, but accidentally put a space, and we press enter, our total sales will still come out to 0. Well, at first glance, when we look at this, it makes us wonder why the DSUM function is not calculating the total sales for the North region. Because the column labels look the same, but this invisible space is what's throwing it off. So one useful tip that I suggest doing when creating your column labels is to not manually type these column labels. Instead, we can use cell references to reference our column headers. So for this column label, I'm going to type in the equal sign and then select the region header. And if I click enter, now our DSUM function is working properly again. Let's do the same thing for the month. So I'm going to delete this out, type the equal sign, and select the month column header, and press enter. So using cell references to create our column labels helps us prevent any errors that could arise when using this function. So let's say for any reason we changed our region header name in our database to just _, which could be short for region. Well, if we click enter, it still didn't mess up calculating the total sales for the North region, because now that we have a cell reference in place in our column labels changed to whatever we put inside of our column headers in our database.